Hey there, I'm Apple Kreider with Investing Simple. In this video, we're providing an in-depth look at how to transfer your investing account from M1 Finance over to Robinhood. Now, as a beginner investor, there's a ton of pressure to kind of pick the right investing app right out of the gate. But in a lot of cases, you don't exactly know what you're looking for. And as you learn more about these different apps, you get more hands-on experience. You learn, okay, this app actually isn't the best for me. So in this case, maybe you found M1 Finance to be a bit limiting in terms of being able to invest in individual stocks, and you just want that flexibility that Robinhood has to offer. Well, we'll show you exactly how to move your investments from M1 Finance to Robinhood in the easiest and fastest way possible right now. And just a quick side note before we do, if you want a full comparison between these two apps, just to make sure you know that you do want to transfer between M1 Finance over to Robinhood, check out this full comparison video we have between these two apps. You can just make sure that you know all the facts and that you're making the right decision. Now, there's kind of a three-step process that you're going to have to follow here, okay? The first step is going to be figuring out what you actually want to transfer out of M1 Finance. Second step is going to be opening up your Robinhood account. And then the third step is going to be actually going through with the transfer. So let's start off with step one, figuring out what you actually want to transfer from your M1 Finance account over to your Robinhood account. So you're going to have to figure out which stocks or ETFs you want to move from M1 Finance to Robinhood. The easiest thing to do would just be to move all of them. Okay, if you just move everything, then it just makes things simpler if you only have one investing app to worry about. But for some people, you might want to keep some stuff with M1 and then move some stuff over to Robinhood. That is totally up to you. What makes sense for your situation. However, one consideration that you are going to want to keep in mind is the availability of different stocks and ETFs on Robinhood. Now, most of the stocks and ETFs that are offered on M1 Finance will also be offered on Robinhood. But if you're using something like an Expert Pi on M1 Finance, they don't have those on Robinhood, so you're going to have to kind of recreate that from scratch. Now, before you do the transfer, it's a good idea to just hop on Robinhood, do a quick search for any investments that you're kind of concerned about. You think they might be a little bit smaller and might not be on the Robinhood platform. Again, any large company, like your Procter & Gamble or your Apple or your Google, all those are going to be on Robinhood. But if it's a smaller kind of fund or something like that, you're just going to want to double check on Robinhood, make sure it's actually over there. And the second thing that goes into each of these individual investments is thinking about the tax consequences, okay? Because Robinhood actually does not offer inbound ACAT transfers. And essentially what that means, an ACAT transfer is when you can transfer from one brokerage account to another, so like from M1 Finance to Robinhood, without having to sell your investments first. Because it's really easy if you can just go, here's my investments, take them from M1 Finance, boom, now they're in Robinhood. That's super easy, but you can't do that with Robinhood. They don't allow inbound ACAT transfers. So instead, the process that we're going to have to follow is selling your investments, taking the cash, moving the cash to Robinhood, and then reinvesting into the particular stocks or ETFs that you want to invest in on the platform. So because you are selling, there are likely going to be tax consequences associated with that. So whether you are selling for a gain or selling for a loss, there are what's called capital gains associated with those transactions. Now, depending on how long you have held that particular stock or ETF, you might be taxed at a long-term rate or a short-term rate. So you're going to be taxed at long-term rates if you have held that stock or ETF for over 1 year. So 1 year and 1 day or more. If you've held that stock for 1 year or less, so 365 days or less, then you're going to be taxed at short-term rates. Short-term rates correspond to your income tax bracket, so anywhere from 10% all the way up to 37% at the time of filming this video, or capital gains rates, on the other hand, go from 0% on the low end all the way up to about 22% on the high end. So you can see those long-term rates are significantly lower than your short-term rates. So it's going to be worthwhile to hop on M1 Finance, see, okay, how long have I actually held these stocks? Is it coming up on a year? Has it been more than a year? And if you're almost to a year, it might in some cases make sense to just wait a little bit before you cross that 1 year and 1 day threshold and then potentially capitalize on those lower tax rates. Again, that's not tax advice though, so this is information so that you can make the best decision possible given your circumstances. All right, so now you've decided which stocks and ETFs you do want to sell out of on M1 Finance, move on over to Robinhood. Maybe it's all of them, maybe it's some of them. Now we have to actually open an account with Robinhood. So it's a really simple process, and if you use the link down below in the description, you'll get one free stock just for doing so. The sign-up process is super straightforward. We have a complete video on that though. If you do want to check that out, it's like a 2-minute process. You get the account set up, you give them your social, your date of birth, all of that stuff, just so they can make sure that you are who you say you are. And then you're going to have to link a bank account because you're going to have to get money into that Robinhood account somehow. We also have a video on that, which you can check out and get the full rundown on how that works. But very simply, what you're going to do is go to the Accounts tab on Robinhood, click on Transfers, click on Linked Accounts, and then click on Add New Account. That is the entire process. Then you'll add your account securely via Plaid, and then you'll be off to the races. So now you've got it figured out what ETFs and stocks you want to sell. You've got your Robinhood account set up and you got your bank account linked. Now it's time to actually facilitate the transfer. So the first thing to do now is to sell your stocks on M1 Finance. And the process for this is pretty straightforward. I'll walk you through it right now. So first thing you're going to do is go to the invest section on M1, the app on your phone or on the computer. Either one is going to work for this. Then you'll click on your pie that you want to sell out of. So maybe you've got multiple pies on the platform. If you want to sell out of all of them, then you'll click into each one individually and follow this next process. Then you'll click on the stock that you want to sell out of. You'll click manage slice, you'll click sell, and then you'll specify the account for which you want the money to go into. So it's a very straightforward process. You'll just go through that for all the investments that you want to sell out of, and then you will withdraw that cash to your bank account after the funds do settle. So anytime that you do sell a stock and you want to take those funds, put it in your bank account, you actually have to wait for the funds to settle. This can take anywhere from 3 to 5 business days. So you're gonna have to wait a little while, then take that money, plop it into your bank account, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step, which is bringing that money from your bank account into your new Robinhood account. From there, you'll be able to reinvest that money into the same securities that you sold out of. So make sure you keep track, do a couple screenshots or something of your M1 Finance portfolio before you sell, so that you can make sure to buy those same securities once you move on over to Robinhood. And one quick note I want to make here is that this process can take a little bit of time. So like I said before, when you sell your stocks on M1 Finance, you're going to have to wait about 3 to 5 business days for that money to settle. Then you bring it to your bank account. Well, once you bring it from your bank account to Robinhood, you're also going to have to wait about 3 to 5 business days for that money to settle before you can actually invest it on the Robinhood app. So all in all, we're looking at like a 2-week process here. So one thing that you might be concerned with is like, hey, what if my securities change, my stocks, my ETFs, what if they change in price significantly from the time I sell on M1 Finance to the time I rebuy on Robinhood? And that's a real consideration you're going to want to keep in mind. So one thing that you could do if you have the funds available is you could sell on M1 Finance and buy on Robinhood at the same time. So if you had enough money to move into your Robinhood account before you actually sold out of M1 Finance, then you could kind of do both the transactions at the same time. And this would kind of mitigate the risk of any significant price swings between when you sell and when you buy. But if you're not able to do that, then it is kind of just waiting that 2-week process and kind of crossing your fingers that the stock prices don't go up too much between when you have to sell and when you have to buy. They also could go down though, and then you could be getting a better deal on those investments. Totally does depend. Now, I know transferring from one brokerage to another can be a process that kind of evokes some anxiety in people because in some cases you're working with a pretty sizable portion of your net worth. So I want to answer a couple of the most common questions that people have about this process, just to make sure you know what you're doing, you feel confident, and you know exactly what the process you should be following is. Now, the first question that a lot of people have is why doesn't Robinhood support inbound ACAT transfers? Okay, why can't I just transfer my whole M1 Finance portfolio into my Robinhood account without having to sell, without having to wait, without having to go through all these extra hoops? And really, we're not sure, okay? Robinhood used to offer inbound ACAT transfers. They since discontinued those some time ago, so we're not really sure why that was. I guess they must have been having some kind of issues there, but hopefully in the future, we'll see that come back. Since they had it at one point, it's hopeful that they will bring that back, but for now, you do have to kind of go through a more manual process of moving your securities and selling them and then rebuying them. Now, the second question a lot of people have is, should you actually close your M1 Finance account? And if you're 100% sure that you're never going to go back to M1 Finance, that you're just like, I'm so done with this company, I never want to go back, in that case, yes, you should close your account, because there is always the possibility that M1 Finance would get hacked, and then your account would be susceptible to hackers, and it's linked to your bank account. So there's a little bit of danger there, but in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not that likely that that would happen. Now, if you did decide to cancel your account and then you decided you want to go back later, it's going to be a little bit tricky to get that account reactivated. So it's a lot easier if you just don't close the account, then you can go back whenever you want to. But again, if you're 100% sure, you're like, I'm never going back, then it would make sense to actually close down the account. But it's not going to hurt you at all to keep the thing open. So there's no fees and there's no impact to your credit score or anything. So the only consideration that you would have there is if they were to get hacked, then maybe there's a chance that something happens. Now, the question of retirement accounts also comes up when transferring from M1 to Robinhood, because M1 Finance offers retirement accounts where Robinhood currently does not. So if you are withdrawing money from a retirement account, you potentially are going to be subject to taxes and penalties if you are not yet 59 and a half years old. That is the threshold that the IRS kind of sets for that. So in the grand scheme of things, like if you have retirement money with M1 Finance, it might be best to leave that there and just kind of let it sit there until you decide to retire. Because if you move that money to Robinhood and then you're investing in a non-retirement account, again, like I said, you're facing taxes, penalties, and you're not getting the tax advantages that a retirement account like that has to offer. So you could either leave it there or you could potentially transfer it to a different broker that offers retirement plans. We've got tons of videos about those on the channel, so feel free to check those out if you are looking for a broker like that. And then the last thing you'll want to keep in mind when you're moving from M1 Finance to Robinhood is that all of your automatic transfers you have set up for M1 Finance are turned off, because if you move your stuff from M1 Finance to Robinhood and then you realize you're still sending $100 a month to your M1 Finance account, that's going to be a whole inconvenient process for you to kind of rectify that. So just make sure that before you do this process, you turn off all of your automatic transfers so that you don't have to kind of worry about dealing with that later on. And so overall, it's important to really give some thought to this decision of where you actually keep your brokerage account, because as you can see, it's a pretty involved process to transfer from one to the other. So we would recommend like doing some real research here. I mean, we have so many resources both on our YouTube channel and on our website, investingsimple.com, for you to check out. If you have more questions about the different options out there, or if you have questions specifically about transferring from M1 Finance to Robinhood, we have a full comprehensive guide over on our website. The easiest way to find that is to head on over to Google and type in transfer from M1 Finance to Robinhood and then click on the link for Investing Simple. So if that's of interest, we will see you over there.